Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Woodall's Campground Management Fireside Chats. Mr. Ben Quiggle's getting us hooked up on Facebook here so we can go live. Looks like he's already got that set up. And so if you are watching on Facebook, there's about a 20-second or so delay between what we're doing on Zoom and what you're seeing on Facebook. We'd love to have you jump on and join us on Zoom if you're interested in becoming part of the discussion. From there, we can bring you on. You can ask questions. It can be a lot more interactive. But Ben will be paying attention to Facebook as well. So if you have a comment there, you can leave it and we'll ask it during the show. So here for another week again with myself, Brian Searle, hosted with Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Management, and Kara Brodegam. Did I pronounce that right? I'm always afraid I'm going to mispronounce that. But Kara from the Canadian Camping and RV Council. And then our guests this week are Emily Peck, the executive director of the Virginia Campground Association. Is it camping or campgrounds?
Campground.
Right. There's too many organizations and too many different acronyms. I always mess it up. From the VCA, and she is also the manager of the Yogi Bear Jellystone Park at Gloucester?
Gloucester Point.
Really bad at pronunciation this morning. It's not a good day for me. Also have Donald Miller, the general manager of Cozy Creek Family Campground.
Yep.
I got that right. And then Heather Blankenship, who is the chair of the RV Young Professionals, director at Colliers International, board member at RVIC, and like 90 other things we don't have time for. So welcome, everybody. Ben, you want to get us started?
Yeah, I mean, wow, what a week. I just wanted to say, and I don't know, just that thank you to everybody who reached out to me the last week. For those of you who don't know, my wife's mother passed away, and just thank you to everybody who reached out and, gave us condolences and everything. I know my wife really appreciated it. So I guess it's just been a busy week. It seems like with the COVID stuff, it's just busy all the time. I mean, I know campground owners and association directors are really under the gun, and it's just been incredible couple months. And I know this last week we had the Back to Camping Summit, which was really great. Quite a few people were able to get on there and watch some great sessions. We heard, some great news from Ohio and some other places about campgrounds potentially reopening. So it's just been really great, and there's always just a ton of news. But we've got a great, slate of people here today, and it'll just be great to hear from everyone on, from their perspective. So I guess I just wanted to start with Emily. I know you're one of those association directors. It's just been, I think every executive director has been running around trying to do multiple things at the same time. And I guess just kind of give us just a picture about where Virginia's at today and what you've been working on for the past couple months.
Okay. Well, we in Virginia just made it into phase 1. We decided that I believe it's 3 phases, and then phase 4 is back to the new normal. They're saying that phase 1 is going to last about 3 weeks, and we have very strict guidelines. Originally, the first executive order that came through said that private campgrounds could not have short-term stays, so anything under 14 days, which severely restricted our parks. It was detrimental to most of us. We only have a few campgrounds in the state that are only long-term, in our membership anyway. I'm sure there's more, but only a few in the membership that are only long-term. Everyone else was just, they didn't know what to do with themselves. We were giving out refunds left and right. People wanted credits. I'm sure every other state is dealing with the same thing. Credits, refunds. There's just not enough money to go around. So we spent, myself and the board, spent a good amount of time kind of inserting ourselves into the governor's office, reaching out to them, trying to get a hold of them, telling them what we can do, what we're about, and the order got pulled back to match phase 1. Our order, which was for some reason pulled out of the other businesses, got pulled back and matched to the other businesses such as tattoo parlors, massage parlors, all of those that he had closed. And we were able to enter phase 1 on the 15th, which was Friday, which was fantastic for us. Better late than never. At least we got there for Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Excuse me. We unfortunately, the governor also allowed certain regions to request to not enter phase one. So we have 3 regions in Virginia that were pushed 2 weeks off. So Northern Virginia, so Arlington, Loudoun, Prince William, a few up there, which are mainly government or regionally owned parks. So that's their decision. But we do have a few parks up there that are being impacted by that. Accomack County on the Eastern Shore, which includes Chincoteague Island, they decided on the 14th that they weren't opening on the 15th. So our parks up there just didn't even know what to do with themselves. They didn't.
Yeah.
It's awful that it was last minute. And then there's parts of Richmond, but we don't have any campgrounds in the inner city. But that does still affect campgrounds in the outer city because the restaurants are still closed, stuff like that. So we're happy to be in phase one. We just wish that it had been a universal across the state.
Yeah.
I did reach out to my campgrounds this past weekend and said, hey, how's it going? Are people being respectful? How was your weekend? If you were running activities, how did they go? Were you able to maintain social distancing? And we got an overwhelming response back about campers were being respectful, kind, understanding. They're just happy to be outside. Other than us being understaffed, we were able to run our staff well. And people generally had a good time. They were, like I said, just happy to be outside, finally being able to be in their campers again, which honestly shouldn't have been restricted in the first part because it's a better option for traveling than staying in a hotel. But it is what it is. We got where we are today, which is great. We're heading in the right direction. And we're hoping that since we're finally in phase one, that phase two guidelines will be out soon so that we can, prepare our parks for the next one.
So have we heard about that, Ben, from anybody else? Like I know each state is doing different phases and different guidelines depending on location and all that kind of stuff. But have we heard about another state that some campgrounds are open in some areas and some specific campgrounds? Because I haven't.
I mean, I think, when you look at, and, some of these guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, out in California, I think you could have that very same, I know it's at the county level out there, and I don't think Mary Arlington is on right now, but I know in Colorado, they were doing things similar where each county could make their own decision. So I guess theoretically they could have that situation. I haven't talked with anybody directly who's been like, hey, this campground and this county is open. I know New York has that situation a little bit because I know some counties are closed and some are open. So
I feel like California top down has said that, as far as I know, no parks can open for Memorial Day, whenever the date is and all that stuff. But I mean, specific to I guess they're not really opting out of campgrounds in Virginia. They're just opting out of phase one, which happens to include campgrounds.
Yeah.
Right, Emily, or is that?
Correct. Yeah. So we originally the governor had said on his press conferences that this is an all or nothing thing. He wasn't going to pick and choose. There wasn't going to be winners and losers. It was going to be the whole state, or we were all just going to wait. And then last minute, he changed his mind and said that counties and regions could request, basically sending in a letter and saying, hey, could you delay us? And then he signs it or not sign it, doesn't sign it. And so far he's signed all of them, even though we've tried very hard for him not to. But there's not much we can do.
We have several counties here in Canada who their provinces, here in Alberta specifically, my province has private campgrounds are permitted to open, but the several municipalities, several counties have waived the provincial requirement and are requesting all of their businesses to stay closed still. So I have members who are mandated closed by their county, even though the province has allowed them to reopen.
What I guess is interesting to me, and I think, Emily, we talked like a month or so ago about this, is the golf courses. I mean, you got some areas where the campgrounds can't open, but you're allowed to have golf courses open. which I guess I'm not a huge golfer, but I had heard stories about like golfers like flooding to these areas to golf, and it would seem like, why couldn't you have a campground open? I guess, I don't know.
Well, we could say that, like all the, nothing really makes sense, but
Yeah, but I mean, it's an outdoor environment, so.
no, I mean, I think it should be open too. Yeah, as we've said many times, right? Our industry is probably the best, well-positioned to take advantage of, not to take advantage of, it probably sounds like the wrong word, but to benefit from the interest in people getting back outside in a safe way. So what are you seeing in commercial real estate, Heather? Are people buying and selling? Is it the same as it always has been, or?
It's been interesting. And just to comment on what we were just talking about in Tennessee here, the state parks have announced that they won't be opening their pools at all this year. So that's, I guess, a positive thing. Private campgrounds that, as far as competing against them goes, it'll be nice that we're able to have our pools open, and they've opted out. As far as commercial real estate goes, it's been really up and down over the last couple months. It's been tough for a couple people who've been on the market where they've had buyers back out because we didn't know what was going to happen. On the flip side of that, some of the larger buyers are still buying, and they haven't slowed down. Okay. Over the last couple of weeks, though, as things have started to open back up, we're seeing an increased interest in campgrounds from people who haven't been interested in them before. There were some statistics that came out yesterday that says that people are 50% more likely to go on vacation right now in an RV than they are in a hotel or an airplane. So because of that, the RV related stocks are up. So you're getting some increased interest from people who wouldn't have thought about the RV industry before. So that trend in commercial real estate for the RV industry is definitely on the upside at this point.
So that's an interesting point though, right? Because I've always been on the fence of like, if it's economic uncertainty and you don't know what's going to happen as far as state bans or regulations or rules or how things are going to change, maybe you hold off. But then you make a really good point to where this is bringing in people who never considered campgrounds before, because all of a sudden the outdoors is safer and RVs are self-contained and it's a little bit recession proof. So I think it's an interesting dynamic.
I know from our park perspective, we've noticed the same thing. Like our seasonals, this year alone, I think I've spoken to more people who are going out and buying campers and looking for a seasonal site than I did at all last season.
Yeah. We've also got some exposure in the media that we didn't have before. I'm assuming most people know who Sarah Blakely is. She's the owner and creator of Spanx, which is a huge company. And she's a big personality on social media. And over the last couple weeks, her husband had told her he bought something online and she was thinking it was like exercise clothes or something. And he came home with a giant camper and loaded up all their kids. And she's been documenting that on her Instagram. And so to see people who weren't otherwise camping, it's getting exposure to a different generation and people who just haven't paid attention to it before.
Yeah, and I think that was fleshed out in the KOA report that was released last week. They, surveyed, these non-campers and people who maybe hadn't even considered camping, and they've had to cancel their overseas trips or their Caribbean cruises or whatever. And they're like, well, what can we do? And they're looking at camping, or RVing. And so it definitely has put us put the industry in a really good position to bring in new people. So that's going to be very interesting. So I guess. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead. You're fine. I thought you were done.
I was wondering if Kara was seeing the same thing up in Canada, if they were, people were reacting the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's already several dealerships are releasing kind of record-breaking sales for this time of the year. And I was talking with the RV Rental Association chair last week, and they're getting tons of inquiries from sectors of the market that they hadn't really tapped before. So lots of demographic variability happening on the rental side. I think people are wanting to kind of get out and try before maybe they buy an RV and those kinds of things. So Definitely, as things are opening back up, the RVing camping world is top of mind, I think, for lots of people right now.
Yeah.
So the other question I was going to bring up is like, as this, let's assume that this in some way, I mean, it's always going to be an underlying current for a while until we get vaccine, whatever happens with cases or not. If the unemployment rate continues to go up or stay at a high elevated level, does that end up impacting RV sales, even if people want to get outdoor more? I mean, at some point it has to, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are kind of basic economics for sure. I think the position of RVing as, you know, quite accessible economically is going to be helpful there. People maybe aren't going to be buying the big, massive, you know, $150,000 unit, but would downsize and still get out to camp because it's accessible.
Pop up, go behind 30 foot, yeah, those kinds of things. Okay.
Yeah.
How about financing? So like Heather, you probably know this from a commercial standpoint, but are you seeing any banks that are a little bit more hesitant or tightening their belts as far as lending money goes?
Absolutely. So that was part of the beginning a couple months ago is banks would approve a loan, but they wouldn't be able to give you a closing date yet. And so they've all been mildly overwhelmed with the SBA PPP loans and trying to get those out to their existing customers. So that slowed them down because that's not a process a lot of them were used to doing. So that slowed them down on anything else. That does seem to be picking back up, but it was definitely an issue a month or so ago.
So
Emily,
go ahead, Ben, sorry.
Yeah, Emily, I guess, how are your members doing on since you brought it up, on the SBA PP loan process? You know, are they doing pretty good? Have you heard from any members who have had issues with that?
I've heard, not from all, but I've heard from some. I know even my park, we missed the first round, but got in the second round. A lot of my board members made it through the first, but I know of some members who didn't make it through the first, made it through the second, and others who still are looking for it. But I know it's a complicated process, and we're still, I mean, fingers crossed that we all can make this through, and that they got it in on time. But I know it was stressful for a while. My board, we actually have a group chat going, so they talk more often than ever before that we ever have. Yeah. So anytime something that comes up, they would go in and say, "Hey, we got ours. How about everyone else?" And or I'm still waiting on mine. Did I do this right? Am I following the process right? And then our Facebook group, the private Facebook group, kind of took off as well. People just getting together and asking questions like that and finding out what everyone else is doing and making sure that they're on the right track and just general support to try to get through this.
You bring up a really interesting point, though. For so long, we've heard from associations about how I can't communicate with my board right. You know, my members don't respond. I send them an email, I send them a text, I call them on the phone, and they don't answer. And so as a side effect, I think, of this, that might be one benefit, is that we're driving more people online, which should never replace the personal communication, but at least it's driving that communication that wasn't happening before.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and we also, I've heard from parks that I've tried to reach before that have never responded, just looking for help. They don't understand the law, the guideline that just came out. They're not sure where to look for it. And they're reaching out. So I mean, I've probably talked to 15 non-member campgrounds. Probably 8 to 10 of them contact me regularly now looking for assistance still. And I basically opened up the membership to, or just the general association, to any member right now, any campground, calling them all members, saying we're all in this together. And then at the end of this, we'll work it out and hopefully they'll continue.
Well, we've talked about it in weeks past with Kara up there in Canada, that you're reaching parks that you've never talked to before, that all of a sudden want to join and reach out and be part of this because they understand that we need help and we need guidance. And that's the value of, we've known that all along, that's the value of the association, but it's causing other people to realize that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of even my list of parks, I've had 24 parks across Canada that I didn't even know existed show up on my list now. those smaller operations are struggling to access a lot of the government funding programs up here. They're targeted kind of towards maybe a slightly bigger small business. So they're really reaching out for help and definitely demonstrating the value of association to them has made our membership numbers surge in the last couple of months, which is great.
Yeah. This has been a great opportunity for ARVIC to show some of their member benefits. I know looking for new members, a lot of times people haven't really believed in the benefits we've been preaching to them. Mm-hmm. Even Paul's initiative with the outdoor, I believe it's called the Outdoor Round Table something. Yes. Somebody knows the name of that. With them trying to get the PPP to be able to use over a different span than the 8 weeks, because we are traditionally seasonal businesses. So it's not the same as companies that operate the same year round. Those kinds of things are huge benefits to small business owners who wouldn't know where to go for that to begin with.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess, Donald, I guess on your end, what's the communication been like for you for PCOA and everything?
We have had great communication with PCOA. They have been wonderful. I think in the past 8 weeks, I've never seen our private Facebook group so active. And myself and our owner have actually hosted 2 Zoom calls to kind of have like roundtables with the other PCOA members, just so that we all can kind of see what each other's doing, what is working, what's not working, and just kind of have like a group brainstorming session. So we've done that twice now. And I think once we go through the holiday weekend, we'll probably set up another one just to kind of see how everyone responded to the holiday with all of the different restrictions and everything that we have. Because from Pennsylvania's standpoint, it was, we have, in some businesses, we have a regional approach that goes into 3 phases, and then campgrounds were considered outdoor recreation, so we were opened across the state regardless of current status within the 3 phases of reopening. So there isn't any one county that says, oh, well, we're not allowing campgrounds to open. We have noticed that the state parks are staying closed, and we have gotten a lot more reservations than what we normally would, because we do have a couple state parks that are very close to us. So they've called us that, oh, well, they canceled our reservation last minute. Do you still have availability? And we are filling up real quick. I've never booked a holiday weekend so quickly in my life.
Yeah, Heather, I guess.
Though, right? It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
Heather, I guess that brings up a really interesting point. I know you're right next to a huge national park, Great Smoky, I guess, and they're working on a phased reopening. How is that? I'm not exactly for sure what stage Great Smoky National Park is in, but how has that impacted your park?
It hasn't really impacted it at all. They opened, the national park opened about a week ago, and they didn't open the entire park, but there's tons of hiking trails open, and Cades Cove, which is one of the big attractions, is open. We were talking about this earlier. I was at about 90% occupancy this weekend, with Hollywood next door open and without the national park fully open. So people are just wanting out in general. I did notice an increase in group reservations for this past weekend. We definitely had more people camping with their friends, so to speak, than I have previously.
Okay. I was disappointed that they canceled the Firefly thing, because they have the synchronized fireflies. And I was disappointed because I love the videos that come out of that, of the synchronized firefly.
Yeah, and lots of people, they wait forever to get tickets to go to that. So I'm sure lots of people.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I guess, Emily, has that impacted your members too? Because I know you have a lot of national parks in Virginia, or like military areas, historical sites, I guess.
Yes and no. Our state parks are not they were allowed to open the same time that we were. They just weren't prepared to. So they're opening in phases beginning the 21st, but I've also heard that not all of them are opening on the 21st. They've not been closed to day use, so basically kind of like what Heather was saying, like you can come in and use the hiking trails and all that stuff. So that's only helping us, giving them something else to go to that's still outdoors. The campgrounds were closed for overnight traffic the week before we had the 2-week restriction on us. And then they are supposed to be opening soon, but in those phases, and they're not going to be opening their pools at all. There's a few other amenities that I hadn't heard one way or the other. They were still working on it because they're having just as much staffing issues as we are. When it comes to the attractions, such as like in Williamsburg, Virginia Beach, out in Richmond, Shenandoah, stuff like that, it does impact the park some, especially when the campground is there specifically for those amenities. So I know the campgrounds in Williamsburg have been hit hard. Colonial Williamsburg, last I heard, may not open this year. I'm not sure.
How do you do that? So I've been to Colonial Williamsburg, right, into the old buildings, and they always try to keep up the appearances. So how do you spray hand sanitizer and modern disinfectants in Colonial?
Yeah, I don't know. And the buildings over there are very small, and the walkways aren't that wide, and I understand why they may not be opening it, but it does hurt the businesses in the area. I know some restaurant owners over there who have closed their doors and aren't sure if they're going to be able to open again. So it's unfortunate because those businesses have been there for years, and we love them so much, and we try to support them, but there's not much we can do in this instance.
Yeah. How does, I guess anyone can answer, how does the state parks and like the national parks being closed, I guess, how does that impact like travelers coming in? Do you still see the travelers coming in and staying at private parks, or does that kind of decrease the amount of tourists, I guess?
I think it's probably too early to tell. I mean, like Heather said, it doesn't really impact her park, but I think it's just everybody trying to get out of the house right now more than anything. I don't think they care where they're going or what they're doing. They just want to get out of their house. Now, a couple weeks from now or a month or two from now, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that has a bigger impact, right? Where can I go? What can I do when I'm out? But right now, I think it's just getting out.
We've had a lot of increase in at least tenting requests. Not every campground is opening to tents right now if they don't have the staff to open their bathhouse or something like that. But a lot of people who have never camped before are grabbing a tent and trying to go anywhere just to go.
Yeah,
is that a good thing for private campgrounds? People who don't know how to set up tents and arrive at 2:00 in the morning, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
Who knows? Right now, I mean, at some point, business is business.
Yeah.
You have to take whatever comes your way.
I know when I talked with Toby at KOA, she meant, because, there's a lot of people that still tent camp. I know we focus on the RVers and the cabins, but there's still a lot of people that tent camp, but a lot of parks can't bring in the tenters at the moment. You have to be self-contained. So we were talking a little bit about, maybe this drives interest more to RVs and cabins too, I guess. Maybe the tenters keep getting no's. You can't bring your tents. So maybe they start exploring the RV rental market more, I guess.
Definitely, I agree. I think it expands the market exponentially, probably.
I know.
A lot of people for those rental RVs too, because they're trying it out.
Yeah, definitely. I know I'm a tent camper, but my wife and I are definitely looking at moving away from tent camping because there's nothing that's open. So we want to go camping. So. Donald, I guess, do you have a lot of tent campers at your park?
We are not, because of staffing issues and not being able to, we're still waiting on our PPP loan. So we really haven't been able to start bringing on our summer staff yet. So there's 3 of us that are running the park. And so we haven't been able to open our bathhouses yet. And we also have changed our cabin requirements from a 2-night minimum to we're renting them out by the week, for the simple fact that we don't have the staff to follow the CDC cleaning procedures.
Yeah.
That is a huge issue right now for my members, especially Ontario's premier gave the seasonal campground owners there like 36 hours notice that they could open on Saturday.
Yeah.
So they all scrambled. Everybody had laid all their staff off and they were waiting for more news and got 36 hours notice, and all of their seasonals started showing up. So I've members contacting me, asking me about summer job programs and all of those things. And there's no information available about any of those things right now. Everybody's kind of at home collecting employment benefits right now.
Well, that's it. I mean, how this all shakes out, I think we have a long time to learn, right? Because there's new regulations, not only in campgrounds, but in restaurants and social distancing and spacing and what you have to do and can't do. Like, I think, Heather, in Tennessee, don't they have to check temperatures of people going into restaurants and stuff like that?
So they've been saying that, but I've been to a couple restaurants and no one has checked my temperature.
No,
I think some of the businesses are kind of rebelling against some of those guidelines because they don't believe in them. So we've noticed a lot of the businesses in Pigeon Forge saying we're not wearing masks. We don't believe in it. So I don't really know where that's going to go.
So, I mean, but also from a standpoint of how feasible is it, right? Because you're still a small business, and not only are you now open again in an uncertain time, but you have to take 50% or 25% less people than you did before, and you have to check temperatures, and you have to wear masks, and you have to clean more. And so I just don't know long term how feasible that is for a business to survive in the same way that they did before without adapting in some way.
Yeah. And I keep hearing stories about people who are upset when they get the call back because they're making more money on unemployment. Do you guys have any of those issues too, where people just don't want to go to work because they're making more on unemployment?
Absolutely.
We lost 2 staff here when all this originally happened, and we said, just give us a few weeks and we'll call you back when we know more information and we can get you working again. And they never came back. We thankfully here with our rec program and stuff at a Jellystone, which I'm sure Heather can relate a little bit, we can take some high schoolers because you don't have to have a huge amount of experience to help with the rec program or help with the bears. So they can't do unemployment because they've never had a job before. And are looking for something to do because they're out of school. So we've been lucky with that, but otherwise, no, we're not finding staff, and I haven't heard of many members that have had any better luck than we have.
Wow. Heather, you were going to say something too? Oh, I think Heather's on. Oh, she disappeared on us for a minute.
She's back. She just has a weak connection down there, I think.
Heather, you were going to mention something about the employers too, I guess. Did you have a thought on that?
Y'all hear me say the employers were starting to not follow some of the guidelines because they weren't believing in them?
Yeah, we heard that. Yeah.
Okay. And we talked about the people not wanting to come back because they're getting unemployment that's higher. So everywhere in town seems to be having a hard time hiring.
I guess, Heather, where do you guys normally get your employees? Are those like college students, like for the general area, I guess? Do you see a lot of college students, or like, do they bring in foreign people to work? I guess, where are those people coming from?
So our season here is 10 months. So you can't use the typical college kids or high schoolers or teachers who are out for the summer. The city does bring in J1 people, which some people use the J1. I don't have anywhere to house them, so that doesn't really work here at the campground. I'd have to give up too much income for that. It's not worth the trade-off for us. So we typically get people who live in the area and with a mix of work campers.
I know some Jellystone parks are really hurting, or are really scrambling because they can't bring in those J1 kids. I know there was a couple of Jellystone parks that have, huge water parks that obviously utilize that to bring in some additional workers. I guess, Emily, have you heard from anybody in your association that's kind of struggling to bring in workers because they're missing the J1 people, I guess?
Yes, absolutely. I know we have some mega parks in our area, in my area, but also down in Virginia Beach as well, that rely heavily on the J1s, and that's why their bathhouses aren't open and why they can't take tent campers, because they just don't have the staff to maintain it.
Yeah. I guess, Kara, what's that like in Canada? Do some parks bring in a lot of foreign individuals to help during the summer or during the season?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the parks here in Canada rely heavily on work campers, and students. I mean, our season is quite short, right? It falls well in terms of summer break at school and those kinds of things. Yeah, we've got a couple of government temporary foreign worker programs and things like that. When I was a park owner, I had a partnership with a German tourist company. So I hired some German students, German university students to come work at my park. So they would stay, and similar scenario where we had housing, we had an RV set up on site for them to stay and work with us. And those programs are mutually beneficial generally. But right now, with not being able to bring anybody into the country, obviously those programs have stopped, and they're working on some federal programming to kind of bulk up the summer jobs programming for students and things like that. I think it's a bit early to tell because the emergency benefits they're covering a 4-month period from March, April, May, and June.
Yep.
I think in July, when everybody's emergency benefits stop, is when we're going to start seeing people out looking for work again. Unfortunately, the campgrounds are open, and so they're running, bare bones in terms of amenities and facilities because they don't have enough staff to keep things running properly. July will be the time we see what the results of all of this will be.
I guess, I'm not a park owner. I guess maybe somebody can clue me in a little bit. I know there's not a lot of amenities at the parks right now, but I imagine when you still have 100 sites and 80% of them are filled, it's still not the ideal situation for probably one or maybe even two people to take care of on their own, correct? You still want more staff members to help, even though you may not have like the jumping pillow and the pools open and everything.
All of our amenities are open, as well as bathhouses being cleaned every hour. So when you're cleaning bathhouses every hour, and we have sign-up sheets for the pools. So we've got people spaced out, and 3 families can sign up to go for 50 minutes. And then we sanitize in between for the next round. Same with the jump pad. We have a sign-up sheet. They get a 50-minute time slot, and then we sanitize in between. So it's definitely needs more staffing that we don't have to try and I'm having to schedule people's like every 30 minutes to make sure that all of this gets done. Otherwise, we'll miss something with the few staff that we have.
Okay. All right. I guess, Heather, since you brought it up, I know I've seen a lot of questions. One, about how do you clean a jumping pillow? And 2, people are dealing with the pool situation. Obviously, people are kind of scared to open their pools, or they're trying to figure out how they're going to manage the pools. So I guess, what's the system you're working? You said you had a sign-up sheet. How is that working out? Are people like getting upset that they can't use the pool more, or?
I think people are pretty understanding right now because they're expecting nothing to be open. So they get here and have some options, and they're pretty happy with that. We keep telling them we're following anybody who's a little upset. We're telling them we're following CDC guidelines, and there's not a lot we can do about it. As far as how do you sanitize a jump pad, we contacted the manufacturer, and they told us to use Simple Green. So we are using a pump sprayer like you would use for spraying weeds, and we're putting it in it and spraying the pad. Same with the pool chairs and things like that. We have the pump sprayer, and we're using a disinfectant that we checked with the manufacturer to make sure that it would work. And so we're spraying everything down with those pump sprayers.
So I guess, how big is your pool, and like how many people are you letting in at a time, and how are you ensuring that they keep like separated, I guess?
Yeah, so I have two pools actually, and I assumed they wouldn't stay separate, so I zip tied the chairs together in groups for families so that they couldn't move them, because
Okay.
customers, they'll move them. So I put groups of 5 chairs together to accommodate families and zip tied them together, and then would measure the 6 feet social distancing and zip tie another 5 together. And then they can sign up accordingly. If they have more than those 5 people, they have to sign up for 2 time slots. And so we kind of like going to restaurants here. You can't get seated at a table for more than 6. So same idea. They would have to be in 2 separate sections. And as an owner, I feel like that's as far as I can go to try and get them. They have to have some accountability themselves.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing as watching your kid at the swimming pool, right? You got to have accountability. So
I guess as an owner, Heather, and maybe Emily could speak to this too, or Donald, what's the pressure like when you open your park for the first time? And there's a lot of people around the country that can't open their parks. And we've seen a lot of photos of like packed beaches, that people are like shaming because they're so packed. I guess, is there any pressure you feel as an owner? Like when you open your park, obviously you don't want your picture of your park with crowded on the front page of the newspaper, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. It would be a huge deal for your business for something like that to happen. So it's that mix between you can only control so much, things that you're asking them to do, and you also don't want to upset your paying customers. So giving them we have definitely more things that they're told about at check-in. We're giving people the option for us to meet them at their car instead of coming in the office to check in. And we are verbalizing some things that were only written before that they likely didn't read. So we're talking to them about that as they come in. But there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, definitely. I guess, Emily, as you're looking at your parks being able to open, I guess, are you a little concerned about that as well? What are you doing to make sure your parks are responsible, making them aware that they need to be responsible?
We've done a lot of things as an association. I actually put together a sign list. The guidelines that came out are requiring a certain amount of signage in our campgrounds. If you don't have the signs, you can't open, is what the guidelines say. So a lot of those signs, obviously I can't create something that's going to match every single park, but I can certainly create a base that they can either use or adjust and print for their campgrounds. So I made it as clear as I could, sent it out to members, any non-member I'm in contact with, to say, here's some samples for you. This is the basic signage you need. Adjust it as you need to, and then put it up. In Virginia, we have a lot more restrictions than Tennessee does. Our pools are only allowed to be open for lane swimming for 1 person in each lane. So none of the campgrounds are set up for that, so no one's opening our pools. Indoor pools aren't allowed to be open. Playgrounds aren't allowed to be open. Basketball courts aren't allowed to be open. Pavilions, picnic areas can't be open. So we're being creative on how to still entice guests to come in and have a good time and still be socially distant and have something to do, basically. Just in my experience, we only had 1 weekend open at my campground. We did not have any issues actually with people trying to gather or be on top of each other. We had a few families, like when our bears would come out for socially distant bear activities, and we had them on on a trailer, hooked up to a truck, driving through the campground, playing music. where the bears were dancing and kids were dancing on their sites as we were going through. People would come closer to the trailer as you were going through, but they would be very conscious of where the next family was. And even when they were getting in line to come into the petting zoo or waiting for pony rides or whatever it was, they would make sure that they would come in and be 6 foot next to the next family. We weren't having to say anything else because they were already doing it. So I would hope that the other campgrounds were experiencing the same things, and that we have another good weekend coming up of people being very respectful of each individual rules, because you have the rules that we have to follow based on government mandates, and then each campground is putting their own in. So I've seen some campgrounds say in their rules that if you're inside a building, you have to have a face mask on. Yeah. At our park, we said we're asking you strongly to wear a face mask if you're off your site, but we're not requiring it. So it's just making sure that people are being respectful of each individual park's rules. And as far as I know, obviously still one weekend, everyone has pretty much been seeing that, which is great. It's very, it's heartwarming to see the campgrounds actually being able to open and having a good time, and being able to get some of this business in without having to have all that stress of making sure people are staying socially distant.
Yeah, I know. People are so eager to get out. I think they want to follow the rules to make sure that they don't close the parks again, because they want to get to the parks. I guess Donald,
exactly.
Donald, you've been open for a while. You have a lot of seasonal campers. What's the enforcement been like at your park, I guess? Have the seasonals been doing a pretty good job of staying apart?
Our seasonals have been doing a good job at that, which is hard for them because like most of our seasonals have been with us for 5+ years, so they're more like family with all of our other seasonals. So we did when we found out that we were able to do recreational camping, we set up a Zoom call and went over with our seasonals all of the regulations and restrictions that were placed on us, and reminded our seasonals that they are the face of our campground. They're the ones that are there all the time. We essentially expect them to follow the rules so that everyone else will follow the rules, because if they're not, then that's kind of where that trickle down effect is. So we instituted a basically like a 3 strikes policy, just to remind our seasonals, and we added that to their we added an addendum to their seasonal agreement that basically says we'll have a conversation with you the first time. The second time we're going to charge you a $500 fine, and then the third time you're going to be asked to leave until we're back into like a green area. Just so that we could show our seasonals, like, listen, we don't want to be on the front page of our local paper with someone who says, oh, well, look at what's going on here, because the local paper actually did a story on us right as we were able to open, and outlined all of the things that we have put into place as a campground to make it safe for our guests, because like all of our amenities are still closed and whatnot, and we're kind of still waiting for different guidance from PCOA. They've been working with our state legislators, like as different areas move into different phases and what that looks like from a campground perspective, for the simple fact that campgrounds were opened all at once and kind of given this blanket guidelines, and now it kind of changes a little bit as different regions open. Like this weekend, our area goes from yellow, from red to yellow. So like our stay-at-home order gets lifted, and we're waiting to see kind of what that means like from a campground perspective. But so far, like all of our guests have respected that. It takes us a little bit longer to do a reservation because there's a lot more things that we're going over with them, not only over the phone, but then once they get to the park, we're going over it with them again. And we've added part of our check-in paperwork is our COVID-19 guidelines, so that they see it, they acknowledge it, and they sign it. So if there are any issues, we have that enforcement that we can say, well, listen, we went over these with you, you signed them. We're not putting our campground and all of our other guests at risk because you can't follow the rules.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I would think that $500 fine for the second incident would definitely make people think twice before they do something stupid. So.
Right, and like with our seasonals, we had to think of something that was off the wall and off the cuff for the simple fact that they are so close with one another that the temptation of wanting to gather on other sites and wanting to have campfires together is there. So we needed to put something in place that makes them think like, oh, I don't want to pay $500. So
yeah, definitely. I don't think any park owner wants to be the park that ruins it for a majority of people. I guess you'd hate to be that park owner, I guess, that ruins it for your county, other campgrounds in your county, or even in your state, I guess, if things got out of hand. So,
hey Donald, that's a really interesting concept, and I know some campgrounds have been asking me how they're supposed to enforce that. Have you ever charged someone that $500? Do you have
no,
a credit card on file that you know?
We haven't had to.
Okay.
However, it basically was essentially a scare tactic. I mean, if it gets to that point, we absolutely will enforce it. But all of our guests are required to have a credit card on file upon check-in for any of those incidentals. Over the past years, like even prior to me being a part of the park, there have been issues with, oh, well, I'm going to pay cash or check for my site, and then they do this, that, or the other thing, and now we don't have a credit card on file. So all of our guests have a credit card on file, and our reservation system, we use RMS, so like it verifies that credit card is active. And if it's not, like we get an alert, like when we're looking at their guests, like that show that credit card's not valid anymore, and then we get them to update it.
Yeah, I think in general, though, having people sign the guidelines is a good way to go. We've done that for a lot of our clients. Some of the larger investment groups, we put together like electronic signatures, and you agree that while you're on the park, you're responsible for social distancing, and we expect you to follow this, and whatever. Does it work? Is there an enforcement mechanism like the $500? Not usually, but if you break the rule, then we can kick you out. So.
We have lots of seasonal parks already using like a format for a COVID-19 waiver specifically, but I'm starting to see parks that do overnight stays requesting some sort of templated waiver to use for shorter term stays. I'm wondering if anybody else is, I struggle to wrap my brain around, someone staying for 2 nights signing this big 4-page waiver with all of this kind of legal jargon when they check in. Is anybody else's shorter term stay members using a waiver to your knowledge? Anyone?
Yeah,
I have almost only short term, and they're all signing the waiver or they can't come in. I mean, as business owners, we have to protect ourselves and the industry like we're talking about. Yeah. So they're signing and initialing a ton of stuff at check-in, and it's just part of it right now.
Great.
Yeah.
And for us, I mean, like our guests, we do have a mix of short-term, long-term, and our seasonals, and they all sign a waiver when they're coming in regardless of this. So we've just added some very basic language that says, in addition to the above terms and condition, the following rules are in place until further notice. Mm-hmm. Like it's very clear cut. So like they can read it, they can understand it, they can process it, and everyone can stay open and stay happy.
Good. And Brian, when you talked about the parks you're working with, kicking, if they get to a certain point, they get kicked out of the park, I guess that's without a refund, right? You're not refunding that money.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, you broke a rule. It's the same thing as you break any rule pre-virus, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think senses if people aren't going to follow the rules. So it's great to see park owners finding ways to do that. So I know as a parent, I imagine keeping track of the kids is more difficult. My kids just, they don't understand the concept of social distancing as well. We can talk to them, but when they see other kids, they want to go play. So just keeping that, keeping an eye on that at a park, I guess, would be important too. So.
Heather, are your playgrounds open out there?
They are. So the playgrounds are working the same way as the jump pad and the pool. We have a sign-up sheet for every type of amenity. Even our fishing pond, we're deciding how many people will fit there and doing a sign-up sheet just so that can see the thing in place. Do the same pump sprayer with the sanitizer on the playground.
Gotcha.
So how do you control like how many kids go down the slide at once?
So we've been trying to do it by families. And so if it's a family of 3 kids going down the slide at once, it's not a big deal. It's when you're mixed with people who don't know, trying to go down the slide at the same time. And they've done a really good job of kind of like people were talking about before. They've done a good job of doing that themselves, the parents have.
So I guess during like the waiver process, you guys mentioned, that you guys are sanitizing, you're cleaning, you're doing everything, you can on your end, but that there's still risk, I guess. Is that something that's in the waiver that that there's still a risk?
Oh, it has to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
You never can control everything. So yeah, you've got to, and that's what they're signing off on. They accept the risk by coming into your park and playing and doing whatever they're doing, that you're doing your best and this is what you're responsible for and that's what they're responsible for, but you still understand that nobody's guaranteeing anything.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So Brian, do you have any questions, I guess? I think I'm all questioned out, I guess. I don't know.
What, you didn't come prepared, Ben? Like, come on, we normally go an hour and a half. You're supposed to be prepared for all this stuff. We rely on you.
I know.
You're a journalist. I'm
I
just
let people down.
marketing guy.
Okay.
Let's flip it back to commercial real estate for a second. I think Heather's got a little bit of a choppy internet connection, but if we can get a hold of her, like, I'm curious, Heather, how does this impact park valuations? Not only short term, but long term. Does this income gap that people are having or the change in revenue long term affect valuations, appraisals, that kind of stuff? I don't know if we lost her or not. She's kind of choppy in and out. Can you hear us, Heather?
I think we lost her.
All right, we'll save that question when she comes back. But so, yeah, I mean, that's one of the big things. And then, I mean, what are you seeing up there, Kara, as far as buying and selling? Are people still listing their campgrounds? Are they still?
I think real estate in general is in a pretty dire scenario up here right now. Everything's kind of paused. We had like a 40% drop in listings last month alone here in Alberta in new real estate listings, which is like record breaking. I don't think they've ever seen a drop that large. So I think it's too soon to tell. From my own experience as a park owner and kind of going through that valuation process when I sold my share of the business, I absolutely see it impacting, maybe not over the long term, but short term in terms of just you have to present your financial statements, and they use that in all of those calculations. And if you're entering into a year where, I mean, lots of campgrounds have already lost several months of revenue and then are looking at 50% capacities, it's absolutely going to impact bottom lines, and in turn valuation for sure.
Do we have you back, Heather?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard the question I was asking you. You had a choppy internet connection there for a second, but we were just talking about park valuations, and I was curious how you think that's going to be impacted by a chunk of a month or two of missing revenue, and then maybe some social distancing and lower occupancy. How does that not just short term but long term affect valuations and appraisals?
So in a situation like this, it's not uncommon to be valuing a property YZ.
I think you're still a little bit choppy on our end.
There were
Is it me or is anybody else here?
Yes.
Yeah, she's a bit choppy.
Yeah.
We're a little bit just choppy, Heather, but we'll come back to you if you can. I don't know. Just maybe it doesn't have.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess yeah, we'll come back to Heather. I guess Emily, on your end, your parks are starting to come back open, or they have a date, you know, where potentially they could open. I guess, what does the summer look like for your park owners? You know, are they going to be, obviously they probably already lost quite a bit of revenue, or, you know, what are they going to be able to find ways to recoup that, or is it just going to be a slower summer?
That is all going to depend on these next phases. We, as an association, submitted our phase suggestions for private campgrounds to the governor's office. They took a good chunk of that and put it in phase one. They actually took a couple things out. We had occupancy limits and they took that out. So we're hoping that on phase two, they will do generally what we put in, if not taking a few more things out. But until we know that for sure, no one really knows how to plan. We don't know what can be open next. We don't know when the next phase will start. So when people are calling to make reservations, they're either going to make them because they want to come anyway, or they're calling to say, hey, when are your pools going to be open? And we're going, your guess is as good as ours. We have no idea. So they're waiting to make those reservations until we know more information. And if it's anything like last time, they gave us 1 week's notice on the guidelines and they didn't put them out for everyone to see. I had to go hunting for them.
Yeah.
So it's not, they're not making it easy, let's say that. So when it comes to the campgrounds and what our summer is going to look like, we have no idea, and it's scary.
All right, let's go back to Heather. I think she's in a better spot now, which is honestly, like, that's a better background. You should have just started there, Heather. Like, you look like you're at a campground and you're camping. I mean, you are, but it just looks better for our show. Do we lose it again? Like, every time it's me. I think it's me. Every time I start talking, Heather loses internet connection. So it must be my fault.
Yeah, you just need to stop talking, Brian.
All right.
Emily, we'll wait for Heather to come back in. I guess this is just a general thing. I guess the battles that you're doing now, do you hope that down the road, like if we have to go through this a year or two, you know, in the future, do you think this helps the campground industry in whole? You know, maybe governors understand the role you guys can play better, and hopefully you guys don't have to go through this a second or third time?
Absolutely. We, before this, we were working our way into Richmond. Obviously, it's a slow process trying to find all the right connections and just generally getting our name out there. Before this, we weren't really taken seriously on the government front, or they didn't know we even existed. So this is kind of been a jump start to make sure that we are heard and they know how to contact us, and they know that we exist and are a organization of enough people to make our voice worth listening to.
Yeah, definitely. I know Arvik's working on things from their perspective as far as making sure they're ready, you know, as far as having RV parks and campgrounds listed as essential the next time around, making sure that potentially more governors understand the role that campgrounds can play. So hopefully, you know, if this thing does come back next year, or if we have, you know, maybe another virus or something come along down the road, we're at a point where
jinx us? Like, we've already got one virus, Ben. You don't need to invite a second one into here.
I'm not trying to jinx anybody. So,
I think it's even more broad than just another scenario just like this. I think establishing those political relationships,
yep,
at the association level is really, really valuable in all kinds of ways, in
Yeah.
you know, regulatory issues and all kinds of things, that those relationships are going to be valuable. Just like, you know, this crazy scenario has kind of made a boon for membership, it's also really, really positively impacted associations being in communication with their elected officials.
Absolutely.
I would hope.
Definitely important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would hope that on some level it like at least, you know, local community members understand the role that the parks play better. I know sometimes parks get a bad rap for being, you know, people kind of view them as, you know, like trailer parks or something, which they're really not. And so hopefully it helps inform the general public too. I know Arvik's been working on that too, as far as getting information out about what RV parks and campgrounds are. So. That's great. I guess, Brian, you had a question for Heather on park evaluations.
Well, yes, but it's me. I'm causing her to lose connection every time I talk. So you ask her the question, Ben. Like, I think it's my fault.
Yeah, I get. Brian was wondering about park valuations as far as, you know, how the COVID crisis is impacting park valuations down the road and or like right now, I guess.
So hopefully this time around I'll keep a connection. But typically when evaluation is done, you're using 3 to 4 years of profit and loss statements. So what would happen? It would be similar to when we here in Pigeon Forge had the Gatlinburg fires. So if you were going to take a property and do evaluation, you would use the trends from the, say, the 2 or 3 month period we all experienced. You would use the previous 2 years to do an evaluation on that. Now, if this continued, obviously, for a year or two, it would be tough to do that. But if it only lasts a couple months, they would simply remove those months from the valuation. It is positive, though, that most of us are continuing to be able to have some source of revenue through this. There were a couple weeks or months that some of us were having negative numbers. I believe Emily talked about the refunds we were doing. I know there for a couple weeks we were bleeding money with refunds. For those of you who haven't been able to reopen yet, or you're just getting there, I'll tell you that my park has 133 sites, and we're busy for spring break, typically in March and April. So normally I'm averaging about $5,000 a day of income. And as most of you did, we went to zero or negative because people weren't here. They had their stay-at-home orders. But 2 weeks ago, as soon as Tennessee opened back up, we were well over that $5,000 number. Even yesterday, we were at $10,000 for the day of income brought in. So now that we are open back up, it's jumped right back to even higher. So hopefully that helps ease some anxiety.
Is that something where like you could, like if the bank or the people have issues, you can just explain that to them and make them understand this is out of the normal, I guess?
And so on a campground especially, it's one of the reasons that you want to use an industry specific appraiser, because if you're using an appraiser who is used to appraising land or something like that, which is typically what a bank will give you if you don't ask for or help them understand what an industry specific appraiser is, you're not going to get that same type of treatment that we just talked about. It's going to be a negative effect. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, that's cool. I guess I completely forgot about the Gatlinburg fires. So you mentioned that, and I was like, wow, yeah, I completely forgot about that. You guys are still recovering from that, right? Or
pretty much recovered. Yeah,
you're pretty much.
The area's been in good shape for quite a few years now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Brian, did you have any other real estate questions?
I have a ton of real estate questions. I don't know anything about real estate, but probably not anything that we need to cover in this specific show. I don't think so.
How was the real estate market doing before the epidemic? I guess it looked like there was a lot of parks being sold.
Yes, campgrounds were selling it at record prices per site, and everything is amazing. And commercial real estate in general is going to be changed forever from this. I mean, even think about from the office space standpoint, that was a huge industry for commercial real estate. And I would say a lot of people aren't ever going back to work in offices because businesses are realizing how easy exactly what we're doing right now is, and they won't want to pay those office space prices because they're realizing it's not necessary. They've been forced to find other options that in the long term are more affordable. As for campgrounds, I think they'll become more like hotels as far as sale prices go. Most campgrounds trade on a cap rate, which we don't have to go down that rabbit hole today, but typically hotels have a little bit better value than a hotel room does than a campsite. And as more mainstream companies become interested in our industry, it's only better.
Yeah. I mean, you've got like Sun RV Resorts. They're doing a lot of things. And some of these development companies are operating quite a bit more like hotels than maybe a traditional campground, I guess. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I guess, how does that, Kara, how's that in Canada? I guess, was the market really good before the pandemic and then it's really slowed?
Yeah, I think there's a significant appetite for campground ownership. And like Heather said, I only see that kind of improving after all of this. I think with how well positioned the industry is for kind of being certainly a valuable tourism market now going forward, even more so than before, I think the value will only increase.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is we are hearing a lot about people like using Zoom and working from home. And I know my sister's talking about, permanently, like, maybe not every day of the week, but she's going to be permanently allowed to work from home more. And before this, that wasn't even a consideration. I guess for the campground market, though, we can't really have people working from home, right? Heather, can you have your people work from home, I guess?
I suppose if I try to think through how I could do that, I'm sure I could have a reservationist or two somehow work from home. I'm sure Brian could rig something up for that. But other than that, I don't know how that'd be possible. Most of our jobs are hands-on, cleaning, maintenance, grounds. You can't really do those not on site.
They've already got a robot in a hotel or an airport that's going around cleaning the whole thing with UV light and stuff. So you never know. I'm just saying.
Could we have like robots like take people to their sites, like down the road? I guess maybe.
Well, you saw KOA's Campground of the Future where the road lit up to guide them to their site, right? So.
Yeah. I think some people are already doing that in real life. I think I was reading about some campgrounds doing that or some other properties.
A campground that has a road that lights up and leads to the site. I want to see it going right now.
I have members who are using like robot lawnmowers and remote tools to automate those processes, but I haven't seen any light up roadways yet.
Well, interested in it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So it'll be interesting to see how the campground market kind of adapts to the technology too, because I have to imagine that there are plenty of campground owners looking at the situation, wondering how they can improve their businesses, and maybe technology plays a bigger role in that. I don't think, we can have quite as many people working from home as other industries, but it'll be interesting. So
I'm going to buy a camp one day just to experiment with it, and just everything's going to be tech. I don't even care if anybody stays there. I'm just going to buy it to and experiment with stuff.
Sounds expensive.
It's fun for me though. It would be fun. The entertainment might be worth it.
We have a question for Margaret. Maybe we could bring Margaret on just to allow her to ask the question in person if she wants to. I can bring her on. Margaret, if you want to, I can unmute you and you can just ask your question in person. If you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, or I can just ask it for you.
Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. At the camping summit, one of the big things that was talked about, the presenter by Rover Pass talked about, obviously the new camper, and obviously Heather's example of the Spank CEO hitting the road. So I was just wondering, for those of you who have campgrounds that are open to transient users, have you begun to see a new camper, and what can you tell us about anything you're trying to do differently about making sure they feel comfortable, that they feel safe, that they get educated, stuff like that? Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
We've definitely had some new campers, and we've always had first-time campers because there's so many dealerships in the area, but it's fun. You know, these people are excited to go on their new adventure. And so what we've done differently is we went through a little mini training to make sure all of our staff, just because not everybody is a work camper, knows how to hook up the camper to the water, to the sewer, to the electric box, and that they understand getting the camper all the way to one side of the site, so they have plenty of room to camp, and understand getting it all the way on the back side of the site so that they have plenty of room to park. So it's just making sure that our staff, while we can't do those things for them, being able to tell them those things makes them feel a lot more comfortable than guessing their way through it, like most first-time campers.
We're seeing some interesting programming through some of the rental companies who are offering learn to camp sessions online right now. So they kind of live feed from inside of an RV and walk through all of the bells and whistles and connections and those things. We're starting to see I heard some talk about starting to offer those in some other languages. So we're seeing some kind of cultural demographics that maybe aren't typical RVers or campers wanting to access the market as well. And there's lots of companies doing some unique stuff to cater directly to them.
Yeah, a lot of this, I think, long-term is going to be marketing and how you present your cabins or your accommodations or your rentals or your sites is safer than hotels and other options that people have to get back out on the road, get out of their houses, go on vacation. And so a lot of that is just going to be how you present yourself. And I think that, you know, Ben and I think we're talking about this morning, you know, one of the hypothetical situations is that, you know, short term, I think everybody's getting out of their house. But long term, I was reading a study over the weekend that restaurants already the #1 concern for people is cleanliness over taste now for the first time ever. And so I think that only increases. And so what do you do to present yourself as the safer alternative? And one of the just weird off the cuff options that we were talking about, Ben, was, you know, I was talking to Joe Dumeg from At My Community. They make campground apps. And I said, make a checklist for the different parks so you can put down the tasks that you have to do every single day for your staff. They can use it as a regular task manager so you make sure you don't miss anything, but then maybe that creates some kind of a real-time status update on your website so people can see like the daily cleanliness rating of your campground. Just whatever it is, any way that makes people more comfortable with coming to you is going to drive more people from hotels to your cabins, to your rentals, and just open up the industry even more, I think.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of vendors that we work with are helping us out, such as Campers app. They've been done a lot of things to have your activities signing up through Campers app so people don't have to go to the store or come in contact with your staff. I know CampSpot did their virtual check-in, so they're like a hotel. You're checking in before you get to the site. You're doing that virtual signing of the terms and conditions, and then you get there and you can, depending on how your campground has it set up, you can have them do a complete virtual check-in where they don't ever have to come in contact with staff. You can offer site deliveries where they're calling in to order pretty much anything in your store, and then, or have a service window so they don't have to walk into the store. The signage around telling people, I mean, in Virginia, we're required right now to have signs in our bathrooms on how to wash your hands. You would hope that people know how to do that. But for some reason, the signage is making people feel safer. So having that information out there, even though it seems like a lot, is going to get more people to come to you. And then, like Brian was saying, marketing it, saying like, you have your signs up, so then take a picture of it and put it on Facebook and say, here, this is what we're doing to make our campground safe for you.
Yeah, definitely. I guess my, I'm old, so my brain works in weird ways, and I forget a lot of stuff.
We saw the video of you, Ben. So you do look good today. You look like you put some makeup on.
So I guess one of the things I had thought of earlier is Good Sam Club, and I was thinking, they do those ratings every year, and I guess how are they going to do those in a COVID environment? I guess how does that impact park owners? Are they still sending people out to like rate parks? I guess Heather,
I don't think so.
They're sending people out, or
I haven't heard anything.
Okay, are they going to be like keeping the same ratings as the year before? I guess it's interesting. I was just thinking of that this morning. So
yeah, they definitely started by now, so I'm not sure what their plan is. That'd be interesting to find out.
Yeah, maybe we just need to recruit somebody and get them on here. Ben, just reach out to Marcus, see if he'll come on.
Well, I don't like to call in my favors all at once, so I like to save them. But yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of that. I know KOA does ratings too, so it'd be interesting to hear how they're doing the ratings this year as well. So I don't know if does Jellystone do anything like that on a yearly basis? Or have they talked about what they're doing this year?
I haven't heard anything. Have you, Emily?
I heard that they were still doing their inspections, but I don't know when they would start that because some states still have their stay-at-home orders.
Yeah, how do you score a campground based on, you look at Good Sam or LSI or KOA, or, you're scoring people on the cleanliness of facilities, and some of those facilities are closed and some of them are, obviously if you fail a cleanliness rating on your bathroom and you're cleaning it every hour, then you've got some other issues that probably should be addressed. But I don't know how you do that. I know KOA normally, if you get a good score, will let you skip a year. So maybe that's just the play for now.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. So I guess that was just something I was thinking of. And I was just
on to talk about it though. We did we need to get maybe a Good Sam rep on to discuss. Well, maybe not a rep, but somebody who's a middle ground. I'm sure you know somebody, Ben.
Yeah, I know everyone. And Kara, you guys are hosting a webinar, correct?
Yeah, actually our third. We are doing them every second week currently, specifically for campground owners. The first one was very much kind of webinar format, and the last one was more of a kind of discussion format for more open concept for questions and things like that. Yeah, the next one is Thursday at 1 Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, via Zoom, I've got over 150 registrants again. So
wow.
They're really well attended.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. So I think we could probably wrap this thing up, Brian, unless you had a ton more questions.
No, I don't have any other. I didn't even have a single question, man. I was filling in for you. Last week it was great because we could just talk about whatever we wanted, and Kara and I were just
I weighed this whole thing,
and it was amazing. And then now it's more structured and rigid and ruly, but it's all right. We're getting by, Ben.
That's what you get. That's what you get when you raise 4 kids. Everything has to be structured and rule based. Yeah. So I guess, Emily, did you have any closing thoughts you wanted to say? Anything from Virginia, I guess, your perspective or anything?
We've gone over a lot of things. Is Heather still on?
I think they ditched us. I think they were just Donald and Heather were like, this is going nowhere, so we're just going to leave now. So.
Well, I'll just reach out to her then because I had a few questions. Yeah, I'm Virginia. We're holding on. I wish that they had given us more heads up. I wish that they had matched us to the states around us. And I really wish that they hadn't gone and let certain regions pick their own rules. That's been the biggest impact. And with this new phase 1 coming out and not every area being able to match the rest of us. So, but we're gonna get through.
Yeah, we'll all get through.
Yeah, I think the industry is incredibly resilient, and just everybody I've been talking with is looking forward to a really great summer. And hopefully, some of these parks that are teetering on the edge are able to just come back really strong. So, and I know I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you at conferences, or some of, some park owners at conferences this fall, early winter. We'll have to see how those play out too. So Emily, I know you were able to get your conference in, correct? Before?
No, we weren't.
No.
You weren't. Okay.
Yeah, it was supposed to be end of March. The week before we were debating on whether to do, and then they everything went to no more than 10 people. It was very sudden.
And so you rescheduled? You did reschedule that for September, right?
Yeah, September 22nd, 23rd.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Who
Now
knows what'll happen, but that's the plan right now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, and thanks Donald and Heather. They're not here, but we'll thank them anyways. Thank you for coming on, and Kara, thanks for joining us again, and Brian, you're something as always. I don't know what to call you. A person?
Here. I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll be back next week. So, bye.
Thanks. Bye.